No television show in American history has ever made as profound a cultural impact as Soul Train. Then in 2006, the show vanished without so much as a farewell episode. All details of its ending were kept secret except one recorded episode that never saw the light of day. What happened behind those unaired scenes? In order to understand this mystery, we must go all the way back to the beginning. He was born in 1936 in Chicago's South Side, to an America deeply divided by racial segregation. Before becoming involved in television, he worked some decidedly working-class jobs: traffic officer, salesman. In 1966, he signed up for a short broadcasting course and quickly landed a job as reporter at WCAU-TV, a small Chicago station. It was there he created and developed a new project entitled Soul Train, a music program that was to be dedicated to all things black. The first on-air date was August 17, 1970, with on-location shots of local dancers and musicians performing live. It became quite popular almost immediately. Just over a year later, on October 2, 1971, Soul Train expanded to nationwide broadcast with sponsorship from major corporations such as Sears and Johnson Products. With its energetic music, bold fashion, and signature dance moves, it quickly became a cultural phenomenon. Its golden years have seen the likes of James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, LL Cool J, and Mary J. Blige, while also launching the careers of dancers including Rosie Perez, Jody Watley, Clinton Gent, and Jeffrey Daniel, who went on to join Shalimar and famously taught Michael Jackson the moonwalk. And one of Soul Train's most iconic elements was the Soul Train line. The dancers stood in two lines, taking turns showing off their signature moves. For the viewers, it became ritual every week. For participants, a life-changing opportunity. And for Don Cornelius, a vision. He served as host, but also as executive producer and editor. His calm, refined demeanor gave the show an identity unlike anything else on television. Cornelius said television should represent all cultures truthfully and positively, not serve only one group. Over more than 3 decades, hundreds of episodes were produced, making Soul Train the longest-running music television program for its time. At its height during the late 1970s and early 1980s, it reached ratings averaging 4.5 to 5.0 for fashion and cosmetics lines targeting the black community. It seemed like a perfect promotional platform. The Soul Train brand proliferated through award shows, fashion events, and merchandise. In 1971, Life magazine even named Cornelius one of the 100 most important Americans. But behind the glamour, storms were gathering. Cornelius was known as a strict operator. He regulated everything on the show, from its content to the look and choreography of its dancers. Rosie Perez remembered that he refused suggestive moves and once told her to change her performance style for allegedly distorting the show's artistic image. Many dancers also revealed they were never paid, despite Soul Train airing nationally. For most, the opportunity to appear on Soul Train was not viewed as a job to be paid for, although some felt used in retrospect. The biggest fight was over music direction, as hip-hop began to take hold in the late 1980s. Very outspoken against it, Cornelius argued the genre promoted negative imagery. In a 1992 interview, he stated, "I don't want my show overtaken by sounds I don't believe represent anything positive." It added division. Hip-hop embracing new shows, MTV Raps and BET's Rap City attracted the younger generation. Aside from a limited number of occasions, rap icon Tupac, Nas, and Snoop Dogg were never seen on Soul Train. This widened the generational gap. Accordingly, ratings suffered. Whereas the show was averaging well over 4.0 in the early 1980s, by the early 2000s it had slipped under 2.0. Stations started to reschedule or replace it. In 1993, Cornelius stepped down as host after 23 years at the helm. The introduction of new hosts such as Maestro Clark, Shamar Moore, and Dorian Gregory infused energy, but none compared to Cornelius' symbolic presence. Updates to the format, hip-hop guests, and stage redesigns did nothing to return the show to its position as a cultural powerhouse. Production became unstable between 2003 and 2006, With several staff members leaving, episodes reduced, and investors becoming increasingly concerned. Cornelius disappeared from public sight. Then came the year 2006, and with it, the final mystery. During a routine taping session, something happened that brought Soul Train to a permanent stop. No one spoke openly of what happened backstage, but from that day on, the episode was banned forever. In March 2006, Soul Train entered a routine taping session in Los Angeles. From the outset, the atmosphere was tense. The production crew had been reshuffled at the last minute. Guest scheduling was chaotic, and communication from senior executives seemed uncertain. Some witnesses claimed that Don Cornelius was backstage despite no longer being on the production team. Those who reported seeing him on the set said that he was disturbed by the direction that Soul Train was going. An up-and-coming hip-hop artist guest starred, but taping began an hour late due to disputes between his people and Soul Train's logistics staff. A former editor claims that the performance crossed visual boundaries that the show had traditionally avoided. The performance during the 2006 taping included provocative visual elements, choreography, and costumes that were considered incompatible with Soul Train's original vision. The controversy escalated when Don Cornelius reportedly called for the entire editing process to stop and held an emergency meeting with the show's distribution partners. Tribune Entertainment was among the key distributors then involved who withdrew support shortly after that meeting. Without Tribune, Soul Train no longer had the national network they needed in order to continue broadcasting nationally. According to internal data, within 3 weeks of the taping, more than 40% of local affiliates had already pulled the show from their schedules. No formal announcement was made, but industry insiders understood that this was effectively the end. The official website stopped updating, the time slot was replaced on networks, and the production schedule was quietly canceled. Soon after, media reports began referring to the buried episode as the real reason behind the show's sudden end. Though the episode never aired, footage from that day remained in the hands of the few former staff members. It was talked about very frequently among the fans on social media as a cursed performance. The controversial taping did far more than disrupt a single episode. It marked the silent end of one of the most influential television programs in American history. Yet endings always leave traces, and for Soul Train, the consequences of that moment went beyond going off the air. It created a fracture in the legacy Don Cornelius had spent his entire life building. When Soul Train disappeared from television, the media fell silent. From its outset, Don Cornelius had been the face and soul of the show, and he refused all interview requests. In a brief 2007 radio appearance, he said only, "I think it went far enough." After that moment, he largely retreated from public life. Many suspected he was profoundly disappointed in the way the final years of the program were handled, particularly as the show drifted away from the dream he'd created. Confused, the public turned to former dancers and performers. Rosie Perez compared the show's sudden demise to an unnamed sadness. Dorian Gregory, who hosted during the later years, admitted no one on the team received any clear word. Many didn't realize the show was over until the taping schedule disappeared from the system. Independent media began to investigate the collapse. As a Vibe magazine article cited in 2008 put it, Soul Train wasn't canceled because of ratings. It was canceled because trust within fell apart. Although the Soul Train Awards would continue, they also split from the original program, eventually being passed entirely onto BET in 2009. Under new leadership, the tone became increasingly modern, often rarely referring to the classic eras of the show. This created a feeling for many fans that a cornerstone of pop culture had simply been erased without explanation. Meanwhile, the advent of digital platforms gave Soul Train's back catalog new life. Reels from the 1970s and 1980s cropped up on YouTube and garnered millions of hits. The music, fashion, and choreography appealed to young people who hadn't been alive when the program ended. Yet the show's tumultuous last decade has largely been swept under the rug. In the years after the show ended, Don Cornelius struggled personally. He was arrested in 2008 for domestic violence, but did not serve any time. In 2012, he committed suicide at his home in Los Angeles, leaving a lot of questions behind. The Los Angeles Times noted that, as a trailblazer, Cornelius left the world as quietly as his creation had. His death motivated television historians to go back and look at the entire history of Soul Train. Some described it as disjointed, others that the show had simply served its purpose in history and then silently faded away. But the most evident fact was that the 2006 shutdown still hangs in mystery. Onlookers started referring to it as the Soul Train curse, perhaps more symbolic than anything else. Looking into what happened with those who had a relation to the show, there would be some truth in that feeling. The emotional toll weighed heavier, much more than any financial loss, on those who participated in building the program. Despite the quiet ending, Soul Train's influence did not disappear. Instead, it became the subject of revivals in documentaries, dramas, and museum exhibitions. Each of such projects reaffirmed that the show's cultural impact continued to resonate, especially within the African American community. In 2019, BET released a full-length biopic series on Don Cornelius titled American Soul, starring Sinqua Walls. The series portrayed the show's early days during a turbulent time in American history. Though dramatized, it delves into tensions the public had never known, including the struggle to maintain black identity in a television industry dominated by white executives. The show does not address the events of 2006 directly, but it captures the intense pressure that exists behind the scenes. Beyond television, museums began to preserve Soul Train as a cultural artifact. Original costumes and memorabilia from the show have gone into the collections of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. Scholars have argued that Soul Train should be preserved with the same respect afforded to Motown or the social art movements of the 1960s and 1970s. Meanwhile, YouTube became a site of collective nostalgia. Thousands of clips, interviews, and performances were shared, some coming from personal collections and others from old broadcast stations. Against all expectations, though, a new generation embraced the show. Young viewers started recreating Soul Train's dance styles and fashion trends. In 2021, the Soul Train Challenge went viral on social media. Artists like Lizzo, Anderson.Paak, and her participated, while some groups hosted themed events celebrating the show's 1970s heyday. Historians now push for a full restoration of Soul Train's archives from 1971 to 2006. While many early episodes have been remastered, the later seasons remain largely intact. The final unaired episode, though preserved, has never been released to the public. Many believe it never will, due to legal and content concerns. Don Cornelius's legacy is no longer measured by the number of episodes, but by the concept he created. Soul Train was more than a show. It was a cultural declaration, the first place that many black Americans saw themselves on national television through their own music, fashion, and dance. It offered representation during an era still marked by segregation and inequality. That legacy was not erased by the sudden silence in 2006. Instead, it turned Soul Train into an unfinished story, one that continues to inspire curiosity. The old footage that remains today is more than enough. It represents a shared memory of generations who gathered in front of the television each week and saw a world where their culture was celebrated. Though it ended nearly 20 years ago, the echoes of Soul Train remain poignant in music, style, and collective memory. The unaired episode may forever remain hidden, but the light Don Cornelius carried keeps shimmering. That light embodies not just a television program, but a voice, an identity, and a presence for a hitherto ignored community. And sometimes it is what never aired that history holds onto most.